All right, welcome everybody. This is the Intro to ArcGIS Pro workshop. I'm going to get started with a little bit of little introduction and background slides here before we jump into the hands-on section. So the first thing we like to do with all of our workshops is give a little background on our team and the University of California's Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources as a whole. I think from looking at the registration list, most of the people here are affiliated with ANR, so you know all about this. But for those of you who aren't, ANR is sort of the public outreach arm of the University of California. Our job is to take all of the research that is happening in the university and kind of disseminate it out to the public. We have cooperative extension offices in every county across the state. We also have, I think we're up to 11 now, research and extension centers stretching across the state, as well as 6 affiliated campuses. And our group here is the Informatics and GIS statewide program, one of the many number of statewide programs that is also part of ANR. So for our team who is here today, I'm Robert Johnson. I'm going to be doing this intro piece. I'm a GIS programmer with ArcGIS, and I'm based out of one of our RECs, the Kearney Agricultural Research and Extension Center down near Fresno. Sean Hogan, who's going to be handling the hands-on portion, is one of our academic coordinators. He's based out of the Davis headquarters. And then behind the scenes, we have some people who are going to be monitoring the chat, any questions or issues you might have there. We have Shane Fire, who is our head GIS service center guru, who's based out of another one of our RECs up in Hopland in Mendocino County. And then we also have Genoa Stars and Priyanka Vyas, who are GIS programmers like myself. They are based on the Berkeley campus. And we also like to do a little getting to know you guys here at the beginning. We have a map over there on the right-hand side of the screen showing where everybody who's registered for this workshop are from. Most of you, like I mentioned, are ANR, and you are from California. Very, very spread out across the state. I see quite a number down in the Fresno area, so that's awesome. We do have one person, though, registered who was out of Idaho, so that's pretty cool, too. And what we'd like you to do now, just to get a little background on who you are and what you're hoping to get out of the workshop, is just in the chat, give us your name, what you hope to learn here, and your experience with ArcGIS Pro from 1 to 5, 1 being complete beginner and 5 being an expert. Let's see. Hoping to learn the basics. Well, that is great because that is what we're going to be doing here. Anybody else? Oh, Lake County. Awesome. More basics. That's good. Shane, some days a 0. I don't think 0 was an option, Shane, but yes. Oh, CalFresh, very cool. Oh, another Kearney person. All right, so yeah, keep those coming in, and I will move on to the next slide. Maybe. There we go. Okay, so why ArcGIS Pro? I mean, there are in the GIS world a number of software options out there. Some are open source, like QGIS, and freely available to anybody. Some are very proprietary, like ArcGIS Pro. We, as a university, tend to get a pretty good deal on their software, and we use it a lot because it's kind of, the industry standard. But some of the things you might want to do are, produce really nice publication quality maps, which ArcGIS Pro is very good at. Maintain your projection control on all of your data. Do any sort of advanced analysis, either with imagery or with vector data sets, spatial modeling. You can even work with LiDAR, drone data, and everything can be very reproducible through both the default Esri system as well as their integrated support for coding like Python or even R. Some things that Pro does not do so well, though, even though it's great and it can do a lot, it's a very steep learning curve. This is a software that's, been in various stages of development for decades, and there's a lot of stuff behind it. There's a lot of tools, there's a lot of things you can do, and it can be a little bit overwhelming when you first jump into it. They are rolling out some AI assistants that kind of help with that. Some of the really more advanced stuff you can do will require coding in order to make it more reproducible. It can be kind of clunky. You need a pretty beefy machine to handle it, and also it only works in a Windows environment. So if you have a Mac, you're out of luck. It is not free, and it can be very expensive depending on what kind of licensing agreement you have. Like I mentioned earlier, the university gets a pretty good deal, and we're able to share it out to anybody within our organization, but especially if you get into like the private sector, you're going to be paying lots of money. But it's still a great software suite, and we all love it, except when we hate it. Okay, a little bit of an outline here about what we're going to be covering. We've done the introductions. We're going to go into a little bit about ArcGIS Pro, which this workshop covers the desktop software as well as the online cloud-based environment ArcGIS Online. Some of the basics of GIS, covering data projections, cartography, what we plan to do today, what data we're going to be using, and then we're going to head straight into the hands-on workshop, which is going to cover some orientation in the software, orientation with the data, creating a map, loading data, accessing data from the online repositories in ArcGIS Online, creating new features and exporting them, joining and querying data, and interpolating points. So first off, some basics about GIS, or Geographical Information Systems. These are really at their base kind of a relational database management system. If you're familiar with things like Access or SQL Server, really underlying your GIS is going to be some sort of database. But in this case, it's specifically geared towards capturing and working with spatial data. And so it can be used for, acquisition, management, analysis. You can do really powerful spatial analyses on data, and you can also make really nice looking cartographic products. So in the world of GIS, we basically kind of have two different types of data, either vector or raster. Vector is going to be very much, your XY location based points, lines, and polygons. At the core, everything is kind of based on a point, a very specific point on the Earth with, a defined set of coordinates. And using those points, you can join them together to make lines and join those lines together to make polygons. And then you can link information to those spatial data in the form of attribute tables or relational tables. Raster data, on the other hand, is going to be a grid-based kind of system. Think of, like a photo, like an aerial photo or even just like a regular photo. It's built up of these pixels, which are like a grid-based cell system. Each one of those pixels will have a value depending on what sort of data you're looking at. In the case of like a regular image, it's going to be, an RGB, or if you're in multispectral, other types of actual color data, but it could be something like rainfall or temperature that's been sort of gridded together over a landscape. So some examples of vector data, your points, lines, and polygons. Points could be anything from a sample location, a tree, an address. Lines are going to be things like, transportation data, streets, railroad lines, things like hydrography, streams and rivers. It can be contour lines. It can be the borders of a city or a county or any other spatial unit. And then polygons are going to be, your area-based kind of features, like, a fire perimeter or census block data, a state boundary, or land use data. From the raster side of things, something that a lot of people are familiar with is elevation data. That's usually in a raster format, a gridded cell format, with varying resolutions depending on what sort of area you want to be looking at. There's also, remote sense data like aerial or satellite imagery. You can also do land use and land cover as a raster-based or a vector-based. And climate data can often also be represented in a raster kind of situation as well. Okay, so a little brief overview of the cloud and desktop-based environments here in the Esri suite. You have ArcGIS Pro, which is your desktop environment, and ArcGIS Online, which is the cloud-based sort of counterpart to that. So both of them can do things like create, web maps, web apps, do an analysis. It's a little bit better for most of those things in Pro than it is in ArcGIS Online, but ArcGIS Online gives you the flexibility of being a little bit less complicated and more intuitive. It's browser-based, so it doesn't matter what sort of computer you're using it on. You can be on a Mac if you're using ArcGIS Online, instead of being restricted to a Windows machine like with Pro. But Pro is obviously better at doing, really advanced analyses. It makes a lot better cartographic products, especially if you're looking for something that's not just a web map, but is like a print type map product. It's going to be way nicer looking with a lot more options to use in Pro. And it's a lot better, although ArcGIS Online is getting better with the reproducibility aspect. They've integrated Jupyter notebooks with Python coding, so you can do reproducible integrated workflows in ArcGIS Online as well. Okay, now let's look a little bit into local and cloud data. So everybody's probably familiar with local data, even if it's not in a GIS aspect. These are files that reside on your physical computer on your hard drive. In the case of GIS, we use geodatabases, shape files, even we can use CSV data that we can bring in and represent as a spatial feature. In the cloud, however, these are going to be things that, for instance, are up on ArcGIS Online. It's going to be a cloud native format, like a service or a layer. In this case, a service will essentially bundle up your data as a variety of feature layers or imagery layers, depending on if you're using vector or raster data, and then give instructions and constraints on that use. So with a local file, you have complete control and access to it. You can share it freely and do basically whatever you want with it. Once you get into the cloud environments, though, it really depends on the people who have pushed that data up, what sort of capabilities and or constraints they might have put on that data, which will inform how you can use it as an end user. So some of the cloud file sources, I think we're going to be using some of these today. ArcGIS Online is going to have a ton of data on it. It's going to have data that's been both uploaded by, just all users of ArcGIS Online. If they have made it publicly accessible, you can go out there and find a whole wide variety of data. You have to be careful with that, though, because you don't know how accurate it might be, depending on what your source is. But they also have, Esri has their own kind of authoritative collection of data that they call the Living Atlas. And these are curated data sets that Esri has published themselves. And there's a lot of stuff up there too, and they're usually pretty good. Okay, going back to data, some basic information on projection. Now, this is really important in the GIS world. As an overview, the Earth is a 3D object. It is not a perfect sphere. It's, lumpy. It bulges a little bit at the equator. And so we model that in our GIS systems as a geoid, which is really based on the surface gravity of the Earth. And then we take that, that's just very lumpy and irregular, and smooth it out and make an ellipsoid, which is a sort of approximation of that true surface of the Earth, but smoothed into a slightly oblate sphere. And the link between those two is called a datum, which gives you your sort of local variations of topography along your idealized ellipsoid. So to take any sort of measurements on that, we need to have a coordinate system. There are a variety of coordinate systems that can be used. I'm going to go into a few of those on the next slide, but it's basically, an XY grid. Um, and then a projection is what's going to take your 3D modeled surface and flatten it out into a 2D surface that you're then going to impose that coordinate grid over. And there are many ways to do that transformation, a number of different projections. All of them are going to have some sort of distortion relative to the actual 3D surface of the Earth, either in area or distances, angles, shapes. Nothing is going to be exactly what you would get on the surface of the Earth. So some of the projections and coordinate systems you might be using and should be familiar with. First of all, there's just your geographic coordinates, latitude and longitude. Those are great for, having a very kind of precise ability to locate a single point on the surface of the Earth somewhere. You have the latitude and longitude, you know where it exists in space. It's not so great for doing analysis because your latitude and longitude are not going to give you consistent distances between objects on the Earth, as the 1 degree of latitude is around 70 miles at the equator, and narrows down to nothing when you get to the poles. So it's not a consistent unit that you can easily compare things with. One projection that we like to use, both in terms of it being, a good fit for California visually and with spatial references, is the California Thiel-Albers projection. It's centered on kind of, the midpoint of California. If you're making a California specific map, it looks really nice. It looks like what you would expect California to look like on a map, and it, works well doing area calculations also. I think the units there are in meters. There's also UTM, which splits up the entire globe into a bunch of, I think there's 6 degree strips that run, north to south. And for California, we actually get split between two different zones, zone 10 and zone 11. This is also good for if you're doing any sort of analysis. The units are very consistent. They're also meters, and it's easy to work with calculations on that. State plane, every state has their own kind of state plane system that is mostly used for surveying. And for California, we're split up into 7 different zones. A lot of times, if you're getting data from any sort of like governmental, either local government, state government, even federal, if it's specific to a state, it's going to be in this state plane system. And one thing to remember there is while a lot of these projections have their units in meters, in state plane, it's generally in feet. And there's also Web Mercator, which is something you'll run into a lot if you're doing web mapping. It's a kind of optimal for a world map that you would see like flattened out on a screen. It's not really great for analysis. It's really more of a visualization type thing, but it's very common if you're in the web mapping arena. Okay, some of the things you can do with GIS. There are a number of potential tools and workflows. There's data collection tasks, data wrangling. When you get into vector data, you can do analysis with overlays, geocoding, and buffers and interpolation, rasters. There's all sorts of stuff. You can do slope and aspect if you're looking at topographic data. You can do hydrological modeling, a number of things with remote sensing in terms of image classification. There's even deep learning, machine learning tools now that can do change detection and object detection. And then, of course, cartography, making really nice maps and even web maps and web apps. Okay, so a little background on the data we're working with today and where it comes from. So this is data that is all coming from one of our research and extension centers, in this case, the Linco Research and Extension Center that's near Visalia, a little bit southeast of Fresno. This is one of our centers, agricultural centers, that's pretty much all citrus crops. There's a few other things, but it's very, very heavily citrus. And I think one of the field we're looking at today is orange trees, I believe. Some of the data we're going to have is a digital surface model that has been derived from drone imagery. This is essentially, an elevation type data set, a raster data set. We're going to have a point layer of trees in the particular field we're looking at, as well as a tabular data set that is from the pack line that measures weight and diameter and other characteristics of the fruit after it's harvested. And then we have some more UAV drone imagery that's going to be a regular RGB orthomosaic, the multispectral data, the DSM, which we mentioned earlier, and also NDVI, which is a index you can get from calculating to monitor vegetative health. A little bit of a background on what the software looks like. Sean is going to go a lot more in depth into this at the beginning of the hands-on portion, but this is the view you get when you open up ArcGIS Pro. It's organized into a series of panes with a contextual ribbon at the top. You'd be probably familiar with that. Any of like the Microsoft Office type environments all have that contextual ribbon now that has all of your tools and other data pieces up there. On the panes below that, you're usually on the left is going to be your table of contents, which is all of the data that is showing on your map. Usually, Esri will organize it as you enter data. It'll layer it. So you'll start off with the bottom is usually going to be, if you have raster data, it goes to the bottom. Then you'll have your polygons, your lines, your points that draw on top of that. You can rearrange them, though, however you like. And then on the right now it's showing the catalog pane, which is where all of your data sources are going to be. But if you see down at the bottom, there's a number of tabs you can stack there. So any other sort of pane like symbology, geoprocessing tools will all go on that right side. So some of the GIS tasks we'll be completing today are finding and loading data, both local data that you've saved on your machine, as well as data from the cloud, in this case, ArcGIS Online. You'll play around with the data a bit, add it to the map, see what you can do with it. You'll join the tabular and the spatial data and query the attribute tables. Then you'll also do some point interpolation and eventually make a nice cartographic product. And speaking of that, don't forget cartography and design. On the right, we call this our accept all the defaults map, but really this is like a, really trying to make it as bad as possible kind of map. These are all what not to do. It's jumbled, the colors are crazy, it's not easy to figure out what exactly is going on that data. But this is really, one of ArcGIS Pro's strong suits is making these cartographic products. You just have to really be kind of thoughtful about what you're doing and have a little bit of understanding of what's possible. So you could end up with something a little bit more like this, hopefully at the end of this. It's a much nicer looking product. It's very much easier to understand what's going on. Right there in the middle, this is the data that you are interested in. There's not some weird background like we had on the other one of think of it as some sort of elevation surface. The fonts are consistent, they're clear. The legend is, very easy to interpret. And excuse me, there's even a inset map up at the top that shows you exactly where your zoomed in field data is in relation to the entirety of Lynn Cove as a whole. Okay, so that's all we have for intro. Next, we're going to be moving on to the hands-on portion. Just a couple of notes. Make sure you check emails for any messages that may have come in. I don't think we've sent anything since we started here, but that's where all the information for data and licensing and other things will be for this workshop. And if you have any trouble during the workshop, just feel free to reach out in the chat. I'm going to be there. A few more of us are going to be there to answer your questions and help you out in any way you need. All right, so I'm going to stop my share and turn it over to Sean.
Awesome. Yeah, as usual, Robert nailed that. And I think we're getting the timing of this down to a science where we already got it figured out like the first half hour really good entry there. We're going to revisit a lot of the concepts that Robert talked about, like in a practical sense, going through the app. And so we'll go through that with some hands-on material. But before I get to that, there's a couple little things that I'll cover. I'm going to go to the Zoom and share my screen first before I forget, which I have forgotten the past before. And speaking of the email, it was sent out at 9 something this morning. I can get it from under my Zoom. Yeah, 9:36. And in there, we obviously got the Zoom information, so that's how you got here. But hopefully you've checked to make sure your software is working for you. There's one thing, and I throw this out there because every so often we have this come up. If you've downloaded the data and you put it in, say, an ArcGIS Pro Workshop folder on your C drive, and you haven't decompressed it or unzipped it, it won't work for you when the time comes. And so make sure that you've decompressed it, because you can click on it and you can see what's inside of it, but if it's in a compressed format, it won't work for the exercise. The introductory presentation that Robert just gave, that was also linked in here, as well as the workshop exercise. And let's see, I think if I click on that, hopefully the data, oh, that's just the exercise. Uh-oh. I thought I sent the data in the same. Oh, here it is, up above. There it is. Good. I've combined those in a single link in the past. So you have the data up above. Make sure you download that. That's what I was looking for. So under the data for workshop, because you'll be needing that, unzip it in the C drive. Good. So with that, I'm going to shut this down so it doesn't pop up with pop-ups on the recording. And what I'm going to show you to start with is where we're going with the data, but also some kind of housekeeping. For example, how to lay out your screens or your various browser windows on the limited real estate you have on the computer. In my case, what I like to do is put my working ArcGIS Pro project right in the middle of the screen, and then leafed down to the left, I will throw in the exercise so I can see that down on the left side. The case of this workshop, there's not too much cut and paste from the workshop directions, but they are good for a reference. Some people like to take different strategies in going through the workshop. Some people like to just plug away and go through the exercise steps on their own and listen. Some people like to just watch. I kind of recommend following along with what I say, in which case you might be putting the Zoom session up on the right and following the buttons and levers I'm clicking and doing it on your ArcGIS Pro workshop or session in the center. And if you need to, you can refer to the exercise directions that you can have down to the side somewhere. So it's kind of each person has their own strategy. But for me, exercise directions, the ArcGIS Pro in the center, and then Zoom up to the right, which I can't show you because it's my Zoom. So back to where we're going with this. Robert showed you like the slides showing the example of the project, but this is handy also. I'm going to hide something. Hide my floating meeting controls. There we go. So I don't have them in the front of my screen. So this is a good launching place just to see what things you need to know about ArcGIS Pro before you start getting your hands dirty, so to speak. The next 20 minutes are going to just be show and tell. You're not going to have to do anything. Starting in the next hour, we will go through the steps to create this. So for now, you can just kind of kick back, download the data, make sure that your applications, your ArcGIS Pro is working. Highly recommended is having a trackball or a mouse, because all GIS applications are very difficult to navigate without that. functionality of, say, your roller button that you click and roll in and out like this. You just doing that on a touchpad on a computer is just not easy. So if you have to go ahead and get one of those right now while I talk. Good. And also figuring out your screen space. So what this will be is just an explanation of the some of the tabs, the buttons and levers, what they call a contextual ribbon in here. And this will all make a little bit more sense as we go. And then hopefully with repetition, reinforcement, it'll make more and more sense and then jive with what Robert just talked about. What we're looking at here is what's called a layout view. So the center portion of your screen is typically referred to as your window or your layout in the main section of the center. Over on the side, you see something right here to the left, says contents, and that would be referred to as a pane. The same thing on the right where it says symbology in my case, that's also a pane. There's nothing to be symbolized because nothing is active right now there, but that's this is just some terminology. And don't worry, you're not going to get quizzed on this later. It just helps when we're say go to your layout pane or whatever the case is. It'll be easier to know. But the or layout view. So here we have all what we'll be putting together by the end of this workshop. This is something that is important to know, though, is that the way that I designed this exercise, we're going to go through a whole bunch of steps, including about 4 different ways to bring data into your project, a bunch of different ways to stylize or symbolize the layers that you add in. There's going to be steps of geospatial or geoprocessing steps. They're called everything's a geoprocessing tool here now in ArcGIS Pro, but how to manipulate, manage, visualize your data essentially. And then toward the end, we're going to get into the cartography parts, but we're not going to include even just a small portion of all of the visualization steps and data that we bring in. That is for the learning experience of how to get it, because the guiding star that I always try to work toward whenever I do a workshop is teach what I wish I knew when I first started. In this case, for some reason, this is interesting. Well, it'll look a lot like what we're doing here. It just dawned on me when I brought it up. For some reason, one of my layers is broken. But we're back to the final layout. So it'll look a lot like this in the end, except for those going to be some yellow dots around on your map. Beyond the layout frame, which is where you do your cartography, adding in map elements like title, taglines, like a neat line is what this is called across the top. The top little right map is called a call out map. The center map is your primary focus area. Down on the pack line data that has the information, the legend information that is supposed to be reflected up on the map, but isn't for some very unknown reason. There's it's active there too. It's interesting. It's funny when odd things happen. And what I mean by odd is that the symbols aren't showing up here. So this is a legend that would refer to the symbols that should be on the map that will be on your map later. The scale bar, I like to put the scale bar down on the bottom right below it in this format of a map. There's something called service credits that we'll get to in the end, and then a north arrow. I bring up all these things because there's say there's cartographic rules that could be bent and sometimes broken, but you don't want to break them so far that you end up with something like ugly layout. Here we go. So we have this ugly layout. That's what Robert showed, where all the rules are really broken. Like north arrows it's not pointing up, north. The idea here is that as opposed to what this should be, is the most important things are what should pop out at you. In this one, there's it's just not happening. You don't have nothing, you can't tell what's important. The map is supposed to tell a story with stylization and symbolization of some form of data, that's failing epically in this case. But I digress. I'm going to go back over here and show you the building blocks of this, though. And one of the main building blocks would be the map itself. And you can see on here, this is a clean area that we're going to end up working to. And I know that most people are not remote sensing nerds like myself. And so you would look at this and go, why are these like little red dots on here? Those are uh, those are navel orange trees represented in false color infrared. The reason why I do it this way is because for remote sensing purposes or visualization of remote sensing data, uh, false color infrared accentuates the health and vigor of a plant far more than red, green, blue does, because near infrared is reflected so much greater in off of healthy plants than say green is, that it gives a higher level of contrast to what's healthy and what is not. It's just a little aside. But so in this case, I have a false color infrared map because I'm using data from a multispectral drone that collected both red, green, and blue, but also near infrared. And near infrared, being brighter, is represented as red in this case. From here, I'm going to go across the top. There's going to be a number of things that you're going to want to know and that you'll come back to over and over again. I'll start at the top. There's the project. There's a variety of things that are in here that you uh, might or might not need right away. The one thing that matters, and I bring this up because it does matter if you're working with some other organizational account, is what license levels you have and what extensions you have. The way we set up our UCANR-IGIS licensing is that you get everything you need and more in general. But some campuses or some other organizations don't have all the extensions, and that's why we recommend getting a license through us for the workshops. But with that in mind, I have created redundancy in the data folder that you downloaded to then have backups that if you say you can't get to data online because you don't have that ability, that at least you can pull the data in as another option from the folder. Now that's away from project on the tabs. I'm going to skip back and go to map. This is where we're going to usually be working at, the map tab at the top. And across the top, you'll see a bunch of different options, most of which I'm not going to explain right now, but I want to touch on a couple very important ones. One is the Explore tab. Fortunately, if you hover over things, it'll give you a little explanation of that. The Explore button here is fantastic because it's what allows you to zoom in and out using your roller. It also lets you click and drag back and forth. But what happens once in a while is you'll get into a case where you are trying to select something. And so if I go on here and I'm trying to select something and I try to do my roller, it'll move it around, but I can't click and drag the map anymore. You'll get stuck in a tool like this sometimes. And what you'll need to do is go back, click on the Explore button, and then you can click and drag and move things around. Sometimes you'll zoom out and you don't even know where you're at on your map. Sometimes you want to get back to whatever zoom level you want. Right next to Explore, here's some more navigation options, one of which being this back arrow will jump me back to the last extent that I was at. I could go to global scale, pop it out. Look, I don't see anything. There's actually, you can barely see it. There's a dot way down there, but that's not. The reason for that is one of these layers in here, I'm not sure which one, the world imagery probably, is global. And so it's just a little speck on there. So what I could do is I could go back until I get to the scale that I want. I'm sorry, I got something in my throat here. So these navigation options are pretty handy. Again, it's really nice to have a mouse or a trackball to navigate, but once in a while, you'll want to use some of these. And then if you get to a size that you like, you can bookmark that, create a new bookmark for that scale. Yeah. Moving on across here, there's a couple other options on here. I usually come to this later, but I'll do it right now. There's also the option of base changing your base map. Right now, I have world imagery and hybrid layer listed down here that if I turned it on, it would pop up. That is from the base map. That is the hybrid imagery option that's available. But if I switched it to the default, which is topographic imagery, it will look significantly different in the background. And waiting for it. There it is. So if I zoom out now, you can see this topographic effect to it. I'm going to turn that off as well. So you can change select from these. I forget last time I checked, there was like 28 of them or something like that. There's quite a few different options. And depending on the objective of your map, that's what kind of determines what you want, but also what level of contrast you want with whatever layers you put on there. And that'll come to in the kind of the pro tips of cartography later on, is just finding correct contrast to accentuate the things that you want. We'll come back. One of the first things we'll do is we'll add data. That's one of the four ways that I talked about that I said I'd show you how to add data. One is by clicking here and navigating through your drives, but also there's catalog options, and there's catalog pane, catalog window, and then variations thereof inside of that, pulling from online, which we'll do as well. Across the top, no more that we need to worry about. I already showed you the select buttons, and that'll make more sense later, so we'll skip that for now. Insert. This is important because this is where we can insert new maps or new layouts. The map, remember, being the base of what we're looking at on the screen right now. The layout was this with all the other added on infographics that can be added to your map. You notice when I click between these, you see different options pop up across the top a little bit. That's because, again, this is a contextual ribbon across the top, and as well as contextual tabs above this. And so if you're going to be doing editing, you would do that in your map view, for example, and not your layout view. But once we're in here, so we have insert. This is where we put in the new map and new layout, and also adding a folder. That'll be one of the other first things that we do, because it'll point you right to where you want you to get your data from when the time comes. Further along here, analysis. The main thing that we'll have here, and if I expand my screen all the way, you'll see it pop up, the toolbox. This is what brings up your geoprocessing tools. And here's a little tip. There's tons of these. There's so many, it's crazy. If I go into the toolbox, you don't even, I can't remember where everything is at on here. And there's redundancies inside of there, and it's kind of crazy. I have my favorites and recent ones that I've used. But the nice thing here is the find tools option. And my pro tip would be, if you're not sure what you want to do, go to Google and say, how do I clip a raster in ArcGIS Pro? And it'll usually tell you the tool that you need like 90% of the time. So you can just explain what you need on online in your search browser or search engine, and it'll usually get you there. And then you can type in their clip or merge or whatever the right term is to get you to the tool. And once you get to that tool, you can click on it, right click, and say help, and it'll give you information. So help tool will show you information about this online. And that brings me to the point of, if you want to learn more, self-teaching yourself in ArcGIS Pro is easier than ever. It was hard once upon a time when I started. Now it's not so hard. In fact, a lot of the times when someone asks me, how do you do this? So yeah, I can do it. And then I just know that I can find the way to do it, even though I've never done it before. And that's because there's like so many search tools and so many options that are available out there. moving back to across there, well, I'm just going to touch on tools. And if you're interested, there's also history, which will give you information, and then Python, which you can, and model builder. Those are really a little bit more advanced things. But I saw that when we did that, what everyone's level as was, almost everybody was like just beginning. So I'm not going to get too far into the weeds there. I want to be able to go slower later on. View. This is where not this isn't handy because it will allow you to say if my contents, if you accidentally close your contents, you can come back here and add your contents back by clicking on it in the view. The same thing as if my geoprocessing gets closed and everything else gets closed over here. Catalog, you name it. I'm closing everything on the right side in my right panes right now. There's all these, I have so many of those panes that were active in there. If I want to go get my geoprocessing tools back, I can just click it in under the view tab.
And Sean, if you're like me and you're in here and you have closed things and you've gotten completely lost, you can go to the pane sets option next to contents that Sean was just showing. And it has some defaults right next to the contents. Yeah. And you can just go mapping and it'll reopen your contents. And I think it'll reopen the catalog and the map. So that's a really easy way to kind of reset if you've gotten really lost. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's a good point. Yeah, because especially when you're getting starting, it's a real hassle when you accidentally close one of these things and then you don't know how to get it back. One thing that is really nice, and we used to, and I still recommend it, is clicking save all the time on your projects. I'm not going to do that right now and overwrite my old what I've done here, but even yeah, so the it's ArcGIS Pro now saves your stuff in the background, kind of like like Microsoft Word or something like that. In the old days, when you might work for 3 or 4 hours, and especially on the original versions of ArcGIS Pro, it would crash all the dang time, and you were just straight out of luck when it happened. So you still might be a good idea to save stuff every periodically, especially before you do a certain geoprocessing step, like especially manipulating rasters. They tend to break things once in a while, but just saving your project there. I did it. I don't care. I got to change this anyways and get my style back here. But now back to the top. I'm going to go through a couple more. We're going to go to edit. Here, this is the reason I touch on this is because you can see a bunch of stuff is grayed out across the top, except for select. And I should bring up something that then I could select since the points are not working. You see if this is working. Oh, good. At least the underlying layer is working. So you got these points. If I want to select some of these, I can just drag over the top. Nope, I got to make that a selectable layer. There we go. Ian, I don't know if you can see it on there. I might have to turn something off below. But when I scroll over it, certain dots turn cyan when I go over the top. The style isn't really ideal. I could do what I did there is I made it the only selectable layer because I was doing that for some editing earlier. But if I turn on another layer and I said this layer could be selected. This, by the way, I'm right clicking. I know you might not track with why I'm jumping around here really quick, but that's not, we don't have to worry about that. It's a little bit more advanced sometimes. But now I'm in the LREC projects, which are the LINCO Research and Extension Center projects. Now, if I click on one of these blocks, you can see that the edges are turning cyan. What that does is the selection tool then lets me work with just that section if I wanted to do edits. So if I wanted to say modify that and edit vertices, you'll see points that pop up along the corner, and that's how you can reshape, trace, change the shape of your position of your points. But I'm going to exit out of there. So I don't want to, I didn't change anything, so I don't have anything to save. Then a couple more, and then we'll take a break here where there's imagery. Oh, I'm gonna go back to my map. And one thing that is really nice is when you have your selection active, clear and it gets rid of whatever is selected. Imagery. So if a lot of this won't work if if I'm like have a vector layer, Robert touched on that, that's selected, you can't do certain things in with imagery. It's not imagery. You're not, it doesn't match up. But if I had something like an NDVI layer, you can see some things pop up that are then available, like your raster functions. And we'll get into some of those a little bit later. And then share, we'll skip that for now. Raster layer, this is where you'll see something called symbology. It's changing the style of your map. If I turned this on, here we have the plot area that we're interested in. And this is what's called a normalized difference vegetation index, with the super bright stuff being the healthiest vegetation. And then the darker it is, the less like vegetative it is. Essentially, because that's a characteristics of a vegetation index is related to the reflectance of the near infrared again. But in this case, maybe I want to change the symbology of that or style of it. And so it's on a stretch, but if I click on the symbol, instead of having it a black and white, and we'll come back to this, we could have it a green to red or invert it so it's more intuitive, where the green stuff's the healthy vegetation, including all of the whatever is growing in that pond. And then the red stuff is the not healthy vegetation. So that's what you do under raster layers, some stuff like that. And then we're going to do some other style stuff that's cool too. Good. Lastly, and but not leastly, the across the left-hand side, what we have is the drawing order and the contents pane. We're going to work in that default. There's also the option of looking at the data source, which there's a couple other options across here, which ones are what you can select. So I can turn on the selection of off of different ones. Like I made this one the only selectable layer, but they can change those around. It's important because sometimes you're trying to select something, and if there's one thing that's over and under it, you won't be able to select what you want to select. So that's why you can change that. But the rest of these I don't ever really use. It's really just the first three, unless you're getting into more detailed stuff later on. But this drawing order, something important to know about this is what we have a bunch of layers in here, right? Like not a ton, but quite a few layers in here. And how it works is whatever's the highest up on the list here should be represented as on the top of your map, so the closest to you. That's really important because if you have like a polygon over the top of your points, you won't be able to see the points below it, or a big raster being like a just techno term for like an image that's behind it or that ends up on top because it's too high here, then you won't be able to see it. If you want to, you can always drag and drop these. You can turn them on and off. Usually if they're not broken, like the dots at the top, the pack line data, then that works. But we can click on and off to make the layers turn on and off, or expand and close them and then I'll show you how to organize that stuff later on. Good. So let me see what the time is. Okay, I was a little bit long on that. The what we'll do is we're going to take about a 10-minute break, and then we will come back and we'll start getting going. If you have any licensing issues, any questions, concerns, if you don't know where you can't get the data unzipped or whatever the case is, we have a bunch of us here to help. We have Shane, Robert, Genoa, Priyanka, myself. Well, even though I can't really watch the monitor or the chat very much because I have too many things open. But yeah, there's a bunch of us here that can help you out. And let's come back at 2:10, and we'll start creating what we saw everything except for that ugly map. How about that? Right. We'll be back at 2:10. All right, let's get going again. And by get going, what I'm going to talk about is starting to go through the exercise that I am, by the way, going to deviate from in a number of cases. So if you look at the exercise, the way that it was designed is it has a lot of the preamble that I talked about already front loaded in here. It has some information about the data that we're going to be using, including the projection information about the layers that we'll be using. This, by the way, is not all the layers that we'll have in there, but just as a sample of it. And that will make more sense as we get going on through the workshop. There's going to be we're going to talk about creating a new map and the catalog on the catalog pane, adding folders, looking at just some of the different options that you have there. And finally, we're going to get into adding data. Man, I got something in my throat here again. So once we go through adding data, we'll be doing it from directly pulling it from the folders. We're going to bring it in from catalog pane. We're going to be bringing catalog view. We're going to pull it from online. You're going to have a bunch of options there, things that I wish I knew when I first started, or rather that were not even options when I first started, but I wish were options. And then if you go through the exercise, you'll see some things that'll say optional. I will skip some of those for the sake of brevity. But as we typically like to do is put in like 6 hours worth of information in a 3 hour workshop. And that's just not practical. I mean, it's actually more like 20 years of learning into a 3 hour workshop. And it's not, that doesn't make sense. So we got to pick and choose what we can do, streamline it where we can. But the way the exercise is organized here, it has a lot, it's putting things together logically in terms of concept and content. But when it comes time to actually practically put it into your map, you're going to add your data and do your symbology at the same time in a lot of cases. It saves time and it helps you visualize your map as you go. But there's this, in the case of the exercise, it'll include that information way down at the bottom. It'll have different things that you won't be using, like how to create, like, do interpolation between dots. That's a terminology for being able to like kind of create a raster from some type of point value. Kind of think of it like a topographic map based upon the intensity of certain things, whether it be, I don't know, vegetation health, or it could be like in the case of what we might do it with would be like the size of navel oranges in the trees, but that sort of thing. But anyways, I digress. Along through this exercise, you'll see all kinds of things in here that include optional. We may or may not get to those, specifically projections, because I have a kind of a cheat code on how to do that, but that's just give you an overview of what the directions are we have there, and it'll cover much of what we're going to do here, but in just a different order in some cases. Now, speaking of that order, let's all start actually using our mouse and our keyboard and get going, and starting with opening up ArcGIS Pro. In my case, I have it docked on down on my along the bottom of my screen. But you may have to either click on your start and search for your apps, or search for it here and say ArcGIS Pro, and it'll come up. And that's what you'll want to do, is start your ArcGIS Pro session. Give a second for it to come up. By the way, if you have any questions throughout this, don't hesitate to ask. I know no one's born with this knowledge. It is, heck, even just the acronyms that I might throw out once in a while, I might have said what the acronym means, but you're not sure. Go ahead and ask. That's what we're here for. Especially when I'm trying to, like, I talk fast through some of the early stuff, and then hopefully have time to slow down so we can go through it again. You might not remember what an NDVI is or what a DSM is or whatever the case is. Yeah, just feel free to ask if you got any confusion about that or anything else. So when ArcGIS Pro comes up, this is what it will look like. Except for you, you won't have a whole bunch of recent projects that are on here. You might have a shorter no list there. But you'll have so you can open up previous projects like the what I was working with the ArcGIS Pro Exercise 2 is what I was showing you earlier. The vast majority of the time, you will start off, I mean, virtually always with some exceptions, but you'll start off by selecting the map option. You can start without a template, but yeah, if you're actually creating a real project, it's almost always starting with the map tab. And so I click on that and it'll say new project. Here's something that I highly recommend is not using the defaults. This pathway right here, C user, Sean, admin, documents, start. It's like buried down in my drives, and I'm not going to know where. I mean, look for it all there in those projects. You can, by the way, change default on that, but I always have to put my projects in different places for different projects anyway, so I don't want to default so much. But the way around that is you click on this browse button here. And assuming everybody is working on a PC without parallels or something and trying to emulate a PC, then you should hopefully have a C drive. So in this case, I'm going to click on this PC, go to Windows. And what I did just for this workshop, just to put it up high on my screen, I created a folder where I put the data called Zero Intro to ArcGIS Pro Workshop. I put the zero just so it would list at the top for the sake of not having to back and hunt through the multitude of folders I have. But so it's in ArcGIS Pro Workshop. Hopefully you have that. If not, that would be you might need to go and create that. But if wherever you put the data and unzipped it, essentially is what I'm telling you to go to that and create your new project there. And in my case, it's this folder here. And then I'll say OK. So create the new project inside of that folder. And then you see it's more simple. C drive and the name of the folder, not dug way down a keyhole. Next, project name. We can name it whatever we want. I'm just going to say ArcGIS. Oh, by the way, you'll see a lot of the times GIS people will put dashes or underscores between everything they type. It's just a habit because certain things break if you don't do that. Some places it'll work, some places it won't. So as a default, I almost never leave a space in stuff that I type. And you'll see that with most GIS people as well. So I'll just say ArcGIS workshop for now. Or a practice or whatever, but I'm going to say ArcGIS workshop. And you might even say GIS, just so it designates that the project is a GIS project. That matters sometimes when you have a whole bunch of different like rasters and vectors and all these different folders within the same environment and this same ArcGIS Pro Workshop folder designated as the GIS project is sometimes intuitive for folks. But with that, we're going to click OK. And leave this default. Create a folder for the local project. Yes. That'll take just a second. And once we have that up, we are going to create a folder connection, add folder. By default, it should pop up with the insert tab at the very top. So there's project map insert. By default, it should have insert up because a very good best practice is immediately to add a folder connection. It will help you so much in trying to hunt and peck for your data later on. We only want to have to navigate there once and then have it be like a shortcutted route to get to your data later on. And so how that is if I click on that add folder connection, now I'll go to, and let me know if I'm going too quick. So we're at the insert tab, add folder connection, and then go to your PC, click on that once, double click on Windows C in my case, or just your C drive if it shows up that way. And then finally, I'm going to click once on the folder where I just created my ArcGIS project, and also where I happen to know inside of that has my data, because that's where I downloaded. If I double click and go into it, you'll see that I already downloaded and unzipped the data right there. So that's inside of that folder. I wouldn't want to click it now. And I'll click OK. So it shows the name 0 Intro to ArcGIS Pro Workshop is the added folder connection. Now that makes things so much easier for the next step. And that next step is we're going to go up to the top and go to map. I mentioned earlier, this is where you're going to mostly work, is off your map tab. Not always, but a lot, an awful lot. And from here, we're going to go over to add data. It's that little button on the top. If I expand my screen, it looks bigger. I'll leave it expanded too, just for your sake. So you can see it a little bit. But sometimes if it's reduced, you'll see it shortens it, makes it a little harder to see. So I'm going to click on add data here. And if I go down and click on folders, remember I just made the shortcut? That folder, I don't have to go down to C drive and then search for that folder and go inside of that. Just by clicking on folders, it already gets me to where I have my Intro to ArcGIS workshop. And inside of that, I have the data. So again, I'm in folders. I double click on my workshop folder. Again, double click on your workshop data folder. And the first layer that we're going to want to add in there is our mosaic data. That's going to be our imagery for a backdrop that we'll be working with. So I'll double click on that. And inside of that, I'll see F41N Drone MS Mosaic. What that stands for is this is Field 41 North. This is drone multispectral mosaic data. Now listen real close on this. This is pretty important. Hopefully you haven't done this, but if you have, it's not a big deal. We'll back up. But and don't do this, if I double click this, don't double click it, but if I double click it, what it'll do is it'll bring me inside of that layer. That's a TIFF layer, but inside you'll see blue, green, red edge, and near infrared. This is the electromagnetic spectrum for what's called bands in remote sensing speak. You got for the blue band, it's the smallest wavelength, green band, then red band, and then red edge is right outside of your visual spectrum, and near infrared. That's how you end up getting, defines it is multispectral data. The thing is if I don't want to open just one of those, I want to open them all as one single file, or one single layer essentially. And so what I'll do is I'll back up to my mosaic and then just click that once, just so that's the only thing highlighted down there in the bottom. And then, so hopefully you're there, just click this once so it's highlighted and it shows up.
Sean, there is one participant who says he doesn't have this option. So, okay.
Let me look thank you for monitoring that. Let me check that. I'm going to get to the chat and see what we got here. Now, you don't have the SE mini folder. Oh, you don't have this option.
Yeah, I didn't mean to type SE, but I had opened the tool before you were doing this. So that whole option where you saved it to the C drive, I didn't do that right away.
Oh, okay.
So I have that folder.
Okay, I got it. I'll show you how to fix that. This is a fantastic time for that to come up.
Right.
So I was almost going to say that happens if someone doesn't unzip, but I've done that. In fact, I did this just 2 or 3 days ago. I was like, why is this not showing up? And it was because I moved something around without doing this. So I went into this folder here, and you need to push the little circle button, the refresh button at the top, if you can see that, in add data. at whatever the top level. So if I'm in the data folder, if I click on that, or I was even on the folder data, if I click on that and then click this little circle refresh button at the top, and then hopefully let me know if that fixes it for you. So now I'll repeat that process for everybody. That all I did was I did add data. If you've already done this, you don't have to use folders. I dive in there, go down to my ArcGIS Pro data, double clicking all the way until I get here, and then just single click, and I click OK. And you'll see this pop up on your screen. Good. Now, the thing is if you look at this, and I mentioned earlier that I do some things out of order here, and one of those things is I like to do my style changes or my symbology changes, depending on what application and even what parts of some different applications they're called one or the other. They're the same different, they're synonymous. In this case, this layer, what we're looking at is it's showing the blue band in red, the green band's in green, but then the red band is in blue. So the colors are what the screen is representing the color of the band as. So we need to change that to make it right. If we wanted to make it a true color map, what we would do is see how on the right-hand side of the screen, I'd right click on that on just the red, and I'd say red is red. And now it really looks purpley weird because there's two reds now. And I could right click on the blue and change it to blue. Now that's the true color of it, with a little bit of what's called like the stretch could probably be adjusted. It's close to the true color, but might be brighter. Like think of it as like the white balance isn't quite right. The way you can change that white balance, and this is kind of like a little bit more in depth in it, but I'm just taking time from the cartography section to do it earlier on. While we're at it, I'm going to go up to raster layer at the top. So while we're on this raster layer, and then there's stretch type, and there's a drop down. And so it's that percent clip right now. I think if I remember right, standard deviation makes it nicer, and it does. It makes it really nice. So it looks like a nice bright and sunny day, even though it was kind of hazy that day. So if you didn't get that, that's fine. But there we have like a nice clear color. But let's do something else. Let's change this to the false color infrared that we like. And now I'm going to do something I haven't done in previous workshops because it's kind of, I don't know, it's something that I do once in a while because it's practical and I like to have options on my drawing order. And this is what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on the layer here on the raster under contents, and I'm going to click copy at the top. Then I'm going to right click on the map, just the map under drawing order, and I'm going to say paste. And look, what I got is two of the same thing on top of each other. But I'm going to change one of those to the false color infrared that was bright and red and shiny like I showed you earlier. And how we'll do that is on the first one, we'll right click and make the red the near infrared.
Sean, like Pauline is asking to do one last part again. Like, could you check in the chat what?
Yeah, sure. Let me
repeat.
Great. Yeah, I'll jump on there. Like I said, I have to hide my chat because it's
Sorry, I think we can skip that part. I just couldn't find the stretch type.
Okay. Yeah, that's not gonna be really important. The way the stretch works is if I click on one of these, click on the raster layer top, and then the stretch type is right down almost dead center. There we go. And then you can change it to standard deviation. Cool. Got it. Awesome. Now, questions are fine. I like questions and make sure that all of you are getting what you need. But here's just something that I usually even say before now, and I'll say it again at the end though, is that if we get into more complex questions that are like, okay, that's not like a 1 minute answer or something like that, then we have office hours through IGIS every Monday and Tuesday afternoon that you can go to the UCANR-IGIS website. You know, search UCANR-IGIS office hours, and it'll get to you a form or a calendar where you can sign up for afternoon office hours. We set up half-hour blocks of time for pretty much any geospatial question that you might have. I mean, it could be little simple things like this, or it could be in depth, like how do you get certified for drone flying? Do you just all kinds of topics? We have a team that has a wide variety of geospatial tech and GIS and you name it, remote sensing expertise and more. So well, you can get those things answered there. Anyways, I could probably come back to that later sometime. Good. Let's see. Both of my files updated, even though I did not have it selected. Is that right? Well, here, I'll talk about changing to near infrared here right now. So what the first one is I have this on here. I right clicked on the red band and I made it near infrared or NIR. The green, I'm going to right click and select red in the drop down. And then finally the blue, I'll right click and select as green. That's the conventional way of doing a false color infrared, being near infrared, red, and green. It's just taking your band order and just offsetting them. Hopefully that answered the question there. Cool.
I'm sorry, can I just
Yes.
ask? It's probably easier than typing.
Yeah.
So, when you click on like, I'm sorry if I'm not using the right term, like
It's okay.
the main part where it has the name of the TIFF file. So when I click on the original one versus the one we just changed, it looks
Uh-huh.
exactly the same, even though the red, green, blue is different. Oh, okay, thank you.
I kind of had a hunch you might. Yeah, I'm going to actually get to that. I mentioned it super briefly or like when I was explaining it, but I was going to come back to how to rearrange and order the stuff because that's a part of the learning experience too. Yeah, it's just you toggle one off and the other. And this is another thing you can do is you can slowly click and say CIR on one and then slowly click until you're in the back and then say RGB on the other and then enter and then it doesn't then you can recognize which is which for the like style purposes because they're the same file, they're just being represented differently. Good. All right. So we got data in there. The first step of the data, we created a project. I got you into a little bit of raster visualization. I kind of like to do a lot of visualization you'll find in this workshop because again, it's one of those things that I want to teach the things I wish I knew when I first started. And the two main ones were how do I get my data in? And there's different kinds of data that pertains to and where do I get the data? And like, where do I get it? How do I get it in? And then how do I make it look pretty? So those are the things that I really what I wish I knew to start with. That's what I'm trying to teach here is in a nutshell. But with that said, let's take a 5-minute break. Let's get going back at it. No, more ways of adding data. And we're going to jump into uh, let's see. I'm going to look to see which one of what data sets the directions called for, because I normally during the break, I skim ahead really quick, but this time I didn't. I was busy. Create a new map. I did that. Get to the data adding there. All right. I'm going to add in the mosaic. All right. Okay, I'll get to that catalog in a moment. Properties. Sorry, this is usually it takes me just a minute while I'm in break. There's a note to save your data regularly. I would recommend that before analysis. Actually, let's add a bunch of different layers. I remember where's the better way to do this now. So I'm going to add layers in a different way, and this is the catalog pane. This is the way that I prefer, honestly, to add my data in. And how I do that is I'll go up to View at the top of the screen and click on the View tab. And now you'll notice, and if your screen's not expanded, it won't say, but there's couple of the first top options are catalog pane and catalog view. If I condense this, you'll see that it turns into like a little box area and you have to hover over them. So you have to note that the first one is the pane, the second one is the view. We're going to do the pane first because it's just easier. And I'll click on that. And on the right-hand side, the catalog pane will pop up. And fortunately, it also has that folders option. And if I click that, with the arrow, it drops it down. And then I'll go into the workshop folder even further. So then it drops down a little bit more. And then finally, the last one is the ArcGIS Pro Workshop data. And we'll click that. And then you'll see, like you'd see in your Windows browser, boundary, DSM, DTM, mosaic. Let's add all of these in from the pane in order. And this is going to lead to a mess, honestly. By the time you're done, your contents pane is going to be cluttered. But we're going to rearrange that in a moment. So starting at the top, all I'm going to do is I'm going to just click the drop down for boundary. And unlike and just hold for a second, you don't have to follow what I'm going to do. If I go down to my Windows options and click in, let's see if I got to go up a level. So I'm in the same kind of sets of folders that you see in the catalog pane over here. But the difference is if I go to boundary, you'll see like how many, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 files in this case that they're all interconnected in the way that ArcGIS Pro reads them in. Some of them are like, you got a projection file, you got a database file, which is essentially the attribute Excel sheet sort of looking thing that's associated with it. There's the actual shape file. There's indexing files. So you have all of this. It's all connected, but the pane, what it does is it shields us from all that unnecessary complexity and just gives us the shape file. And with that shape file, we can do a couple ways. The first way is you can just click on it, drag and drop, and it'll appear and it'll cover everything up. Because if you drag and drop it onto the window in the middle, it'll put it at the top. And we might not want it at the top. We probably don't. So the way we do then is click on it just once. Oops. Click on it once and then just drag it down below the others. So then if I zoom out, you'll see that's the boundary of the Linco Research and Extension Center. Now, the next way you could do this is adding your data. We'll go to the DSM and you can right click on it and click Add to Current Map is the top option. So if I right click, it'll pop it up and then you'll see it turn gray in the middle because that's a digital surface model. I can do the same thing with the right click and the digital surface model for the whole research center, which will play with the symbology of this. I can add to current map. Those all draw on the top of your map. But instead, we might want there's also digital terrain model. You can drag and drop that one in. That's another elevational map. But what you can do is drag it all the way over to your contents pane and see how I can just place it where I want it. I can put it underneath a couple of others. That's usually it's more tidy in general. Just you have to drag it further. We've already done the mosaic. We have NDVI. I'm going to drag and drop that over there somewhere. It's going to show up as gray too. I'm going to skip Packline. I'm going to come back to that, the last one, because that's a little bit different than the rest. I'm going to go to projects. And so there's two options there. There's the the F41N field. So I'm going to click and drag that to the very top, and it'll pop up. And then the LREC projects, I'm going to click and drag that somewhere kind of down by the bottom, somewhere lower down. Lastly, I'm going to just open this up, but this is the reason this is here. There's the F41 trees and the LREC trees. We're going to actually pull this in from online, but I put it there because some people sign up and their licenses don't allow them to download online data. And so I just have that redundantly in there. If you run into this later on when we get to the step, then and you can't import it from online, you'll still have the tree data available there to do your final products. Try to plan ahead for that possibility of problems. So the next one is, and I said we come back to it, is the pack line data. Now, this is what's unique about this. This layer is a CSV file, comma separated value file that looks like an Excel sheet when it's like open in the right application. But this doesn't have any spatial reference to it. It won't pop up on your map. What will happen is if I take this and I drag it over and put it either on the window here or put it over in the drawing pane and let go of it, you won't see anything change. But if you scroll all the way down, you'll see standalone tables. And with that, what if I right click on that and click open, which is the fifth option down. So I right clicked on, if I scroll all the way down, standalone tables, the pack line data CSV, go up and click open, you'll see this attribute table pop up. And what we have here, and this is a little explanation of why we selected this kind of data set and talking to the question that we had earlier, is this is ancillary data or data that we can relate to other types of raster or you name it, kind of whatever other spatial data. But the way this at this particular facility, and I don't think or know if this is still active, but they have what's called a pack line system where they have RFID numbers attached to each of their trees. And when they come and they harvest each tree, they bundle all of the fruit, in this case, navel oranges, and those bundles are all tagged with that tree data. And then that tree data goes through this pack line that measures the weight, the diameter, the volume, and visual grade and overall roundness. And then it's assigned an FID or a field ID number that we have here. This is what's interesting is if we go up, we don't have we don't have the trees yet. We'll have to bring the trees in from online in a moment. The trees also have that same FID number that then you can join those two together with. And then this will become attributes to that spatial data. So where you're taking like data, taking this away, measuring it, and then reattaching it. Good. It's not a weird practice, and it actually comes up into a variety of different contexts within GIS. I've had projects where we went out and we measured, this sounds fun too, by the way, measured fecal coliform from cow patties, and where we take samples, we tag the location of it, go send it to the lab, and then that lab data with that unique ID could then be reattached to the position of that cow patty to see it happens to be influencing stream fecal coliform load. So that'd be another way of like in a totally different context, and kind of gross sounded probably, but that's an example of how this could be done too. All right, let's rearrange some data and then let's bring in our trees because that'd be the next cool step. So this is a clutter. Like I said, we're not going to need all this data, but I bring all this data in here for a purpose. And that's because I want to be able to show you different ways of organization, rearranging things like hierarchically, like scale, but also in importance sometimes. But right now, let's do this. We're going to click on the first DSM. So hopefully all of these grayed out ones are here. let's do this. Let's click on LREC DSM. Click and hold down your control key on your keyboard. Click the F1 and DSM. Let's click the F 41 North DSM, and then right click, and then about, let's see, how far down is it? Add, oh, group. That's the third one down. I was thinking it was halfway down, but yeah, the third one down is group. And so what that did is it grouped it into a folder. I can slow click on that and just call that elevation. Click enter. The value of that is I can turn off all of my elevation data on and off, or collapse it and get it out of the way in a pretty short order so I can then see what's underneath it or bring it back.
Can you
And
possibly do that again, how you selected all of those?
sure, I'll do it again for another set of data. How about this? We got elevation. Let's do vectors. So we can do this with the LREC boundary. I click on that, and then on my keyboard, I could press and control click. So I do control on the keyboard, go up to LREC projects and LREC field. Then I right click and I click the fourth one down, group, and then it grouped all of those together. And with that, I can then slow click one and type in vector. Vector being points, lines, and polygons in the GIS vernacular. Good. So now I have vectors and elevation that I can then turn off if I want to see what's down below it. And I can, it's just expedites being able to toggle through your layers. And then put the things that you most want up on the highest priority. Good. All right, let's do this then. Let's bring in one more layer, and then we'll get to going on a little bit of analysis stuff and a little bit more organization as well. So the next way, we're gonna bring in two different types of layer sets. One being the tree data. So the way that we can bring in tree data from catalog, this is my preferred way of doing it. You might already hopefully you still have your catalog open in the right-hand side. What I'll do is I'm going to click on the next one over. So there's project. What I mean by next one over, there's project that's under catalog, and then there's portal, and I click on portal. So you can see on the top of your catalog pane, click on the portal option for a little bit of explanation that shows all of my content from my ArcGIS Online by default. You might not have anything there, but that some probably don't in most cases here. But this is like just various projects that I have online data for. So there's my personal data, but there's other options. There's my favorites, which I have online favorites too. And I have my next one, my groups, so groups of people that I'm sharing data with. And then we're getting my organization, which we have data on here that's unique to ANR. And well, not just ANR, we got a bunch of curated data sets, but the last two being most important for this workshop at least is going to be ArcGIS Online. So anytime you publish something online in your ArcGIS Online for everybody to see, it can be found by, well, everybody right here in your ArcGIS Pro or if you're in an ArcGIS Online session. And in this case, all I do is LREC _ trees and click enter, and you'll see it pop up is one of the first options. And if I hover over it, you'll see in here that the owner of it is SD Hogan, me, UCANR, and it was modified from a layer that Robert Johnson put together many years ago because I had to do some tweaks to it for the workshop, and then republished it here back in about 4 years ago. And all I have to do now is right click and add to current map. And you'll see the wreck will get covered with trees. Like going to be all the trees that were at least in 2022 that we had. But I mentioned earlier there was an issue when I looked at the pack line data. You don't have to do this now, and I opened it, and you saw that there was the FID number, and now I'm going to exit out of it again. That if I go to my LREC trees, you can see how I have to expand it, and it's on inside of a. I don't know why they changed this. It was about 4 years ago. ArcGIS Online changed this, so there's like no, it's inside of this group of LREC trees. I can just drag and drop that out, but it's not important if you don't. And get rid of the other one by right clicking. Don't worry if you didn't do that. Won't make any difference. But just keep it tied to what I did is I just right clicked and removed the other one that was attached to it. It was inside of. But now I have the LREC trees. And what I can do is right click and go to attribute table, the fifth one down. So again, I'm on LREC trees. Hopefully it's at the top. Right click, open attribute table. And you'll see a whole bunch of information about it, including this FID number that matches the pack line data. And it says the variety of everything. And this is not just the field we're looking at. It's all the different fields all over the Lynn Cove Research Center. And one of the most important ones of these is the one that says F23, F71, the under field. In this case is F41 North is the one that we're going to be mapping today. So I'm going to X out of this here. In a couple more minutes, I'll work on this, and then we'll take a break. Is everybody good so far? I'm going to take a peek at the chat. I see there's been chats that come in. I'm sure my team's been answering stuff as we go. There you go. Thank you, Priyanka. Fielding questions. Good. So
Not sure I answered the question because I'm not doing the exercise at the same time, but I believe it was the catalog pane or so. I don't.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions right now? You can unmute if you want.
Hey, Sean, there were a couple people who just had a question about the grouping that you're seeing.
Yeah.
Could you open the vector grouping? They missed that part.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So what I did in here, I'll undo what I did and then I'll redo it. So I'm going to just take all of these and I'm going to pull it out of the group. I'm going to delete vector. So I'm going to just remove that. So the way I did this both for the elevation data as well as the vector data is I clicked on the first one, and if they're spread out, you can do it the same way. You can either do shift to like select a range, or you can push down control and click each one of the vector. And as a reminder, vector layers are point lines and polygons. I'm leaving the points out right now because I want to work with that separately and just make it easier to see if we shut all the polygons down. But once I've selected a set of these, all I do is I right click on my mouse and go up to the fourth option from the top of the pop-up the options and click group, and it puts them into a group. And then for organizational purposes, we might want to change the name of that. In this case, I had it vector last time. I could call it polygon or polygons and click enter. And then now what I can do is I can turn all of those off at once, or I can reduce them so I can see all the rest of my contents or more easily. Good. So now I'm going to do a couple things at once.
Can I ask one quick question?
Oh, yeah,
I
sure.
apologize.
No problem.
So when you're unselecting the grouping, so when I unselect my grouping, I notice that none of the layers that are in the grouping actually unselect. Is that
Correct.
supposed to happen?
Yes. Yeah. The reason for that is because it can be conditional. You might want to have one or two of those layers still stay on. So when you turn it on, you might only want the boundary to pop up. So if I turn it on, I only want the boundary. I don't want the projects and the field to pop up. So you have flexibility to visualize it and kind of like a
Okay, so
nested
the
fashion.
grouping itself, like that grouping doesn't necessarily mean like you can put them all on or off with that checkbox. It's still like individual control underneath.
Yeah, underneath it, but you can turn off whatever number of those that are under it with that grouping.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Yeah. And it just makes it
Was
easy, like keep it tidy.
was the elevation added on there, and if so, how, or was it just a rename?
Oh, I grouped the elevation layers together as the example earlier. And by the way, yeah, don't worry that like 90% of this stuff is for a learning experience of like organizing it because again, it's one of those things that I wish that I knew when I was first starting is how to keep my stuff kind of organized. Otherwise, it gets out of control, especially when you're trying to learn what or figure out what layers you want to add into your map to make it look the way that you want it to look. And so having all these experimenting with, oh, I do want this and I don't want that, then you can organize it and then unselect and then change the higher, like how high it is in your map, that sort of thing. When we come down to the end, we're going to start jettisoning, deleting a bunch of these or removing them because we won't need like the vast majority. The elevation layers we won't need. We won't need. I could show you how to do NAPE or interpolation or something like that, but we're not going to use those in our final product at all. But now that we have the trees in here, let's do something and one thing, and then we're going to take a break just to give everybody a breather. And that is select by attributes. So I already brought it up once, but I'll do it again. I'll right click and I'll do the attribute table and you'll see it pop up here. And I mentioned before that the field is this is the important one that we're interested in because it's going to be the area that we want to map. We don't want to like when you have too many trees there, it's just what you don't know what to focus on. So we're going to focus on one field. And how we do that is there's this option at the top called select by attributes. And we're going to click on that and it'll pop up somewhere on your screen. The last place I did it popped up to the right corner. And in here, we'll have the input rows and then new selection. So we're going to do a new selection. And then when we get down to the bottom, or when next down here, we're going to select a field. And I don't know, ironically, it's not really the right word. Just coincidentally, the field name is field. And we're going to say equal to, or sometimes it's you could do begins with, because that might make it a little bit easier. And we can type in F41N, click enter. It's not giving me the options. Is equal to F40. Oh, interesting. If we scroll down, why the heck? It's interesting that it's not, oh, it's
You
just
have it,
covering all of
it's
it.
not equal. It says it's not equal to.
Oh, it's not equal. Oh, okay. Begins with, and then add clause and click apply. You don't even have to put add clause. This is interesting. Why in the world? That's just something.
Yeah, I would remove that. There you go.
Yeah, then I'll click apply. I just accidentally hit. Now, there you go. Yes, so it's selected. We just don't see it. Adding the clause accidentally was not the right thing to do. So it begins with F41. If I would have just clicked F41 instead of F41 north, it would give me different options. But now, if you look down at the very bottom of the screen, you can't see anything special except for on the map that was previously covered up with my select attributes pane. But you can see in the center of this, we got all of these are highlighted in cyan. And inside the table, if I were to scroll far enough, somewhere in here, there'll be cyan highlighted features. Easier way to do this is at the bottom, very bottom of the screen. At the bottom of the table, there's an option for show all records and then show selected records. And if I click on that, you will see all of the trees that we're interested in. Now, I mentioned this earlier, and it probably just went over everyone's head if you weren't like you hadn't already done GIS, because there'd be no reason to think about it at the time. But I said that if you do a process on anything selected, the process, if you have a layer selected and you do any kind of geoprocessing, the geoprocessing will only apply to what's selected. And we are interested in just capturing these trees or working with these trees for our final product. So I'm going to kill a couple birds with one stone right now. One, remember all of these trees are coming from online. If I looked at the source of all of them, and I can X out of this because they're already selected. If I looked at the source of the trees, you'll see in here that it's HTTPS, CDN, ArcGIS.com. So it's the source. If you look at the top of the left where I clicked on the source options in the table of contents, it's showing it at this address online instead of rather than my C drive, for example. So we might not want it to be online. We might want to own it ourselves. We also very likely want to change it into the projection that we're working in our map with, because sometimes bad things can happen if you try to do analysis between two different projected layers. So if I'm using like WGIS 84, I don't know, so like, or I don't know, NAD 83 versus UTM, and I'm trying to do an analysis between two very different types of projections. Shane will attest to this. There's ways that you can really mess up your analysis results.
Yes, there is.
Heard some stories. So we wanted to kill two birds with one stone. We want to make it our own, and we want to project it the same time. And then also isolate, so we're really killing three birds with one stone, and then isolate to just these trees for our final mapping product. And how we'll do that is, and then we'll take a break, is right click on that layer on the trees, go down to where it says data. So it's like this fifth one from the bottom, and we're going to select export features. Now, by default, what it will do is it'll export these features into our geodatabase, which is fine. I don't mind. We can work with it in a geodatabase. That when you create your project to start with, I don't remember if I mentioned it before, but I don't think I did. When you create your project, it creates a geodatabase in the folder with everything else automatically. And that's where you can, it's like a repository for all of the products that you work with within your project. And so what we'll do here is I am going to click on just the layer, and it'll give the extension for where in the GDB, the geodatabase, where we're going to put it at. But this is no longer going to be LREC trees. This is actually going to be F41N trees. And that's all we have to type there. So we have F41N trees, and I put the underscore in there. Just note, if you're putting something in a geodatabase, it has to start with a letter. It can't start with a number. And once we have that,
how did you get in the output feature class there, bar? How did you get it to come up with that long
here, I'll show it to
URL
you.
or whatever?
I'll show it to you again. I'll do right click, data,
Yeah, I'm there.
export features. I just click on the output feature class and it'll give you that long
Mm.
line.
Okay, mine doesn't do that.
Really?
No.
That's odd.
Yeah.
Huh. If you click on it here, do you have a UCANR license?
Uh-huh.
Oh,
It just says memory backslash LREC underscore trees underscore export features. And when I click on it, it doesn't change anything.
what that sounds like is when the only time that happens generally is when you start a new project and you say start without a template, and then
Hmm.
it does everything in temporary memory.
Hmm.
Another way you can do it, go ahead, Shane.
I was just going to say, I think what you're going to point out.
The other way we can do it is we can go over here and click on the browse, and we can browse to our folders, browse to our workshop, browse to wherever you want in here. In fact, this is just practice, so we can just do it at this level if we want. And then we can just say F41N underscore trees dot SHP. It's going to create a shape file instead of a geodatabase file. And then I'm going to do it that way for now. It's the same if you just, for everybody else, it'll look, it'll just, you could just put the F41 at the end of your geodatabase tagline. And then we click OK. Oh, wait, whoa. Actually, one more thing, and this is where I was saying I could kill an extra bird with the same stone, is I can go in to environments. And if you already pushed go, don't worry, it won't matter today, but this is just a good practice to know. If we go into the environments, I can click the drop down and then project it as the same as the mosaic, wherever the mosaic is in down at the bottom, because that was the first layer that we put in. And so that'd be what we'd standardize the project to. So it's going to project the results in the UTM zone 10, 11 North projection that the raster is in. So that how I did that is I typed in the name here, went to environments, added in the UTM 11 North, and then I click OK. And then it'll run, and you won't see anything really change on your screen. But what really did change, though, is that this layer that was created, if I turn off the LREC trees now, that'll be the only thing left standing, as far as trees go, at least. There was a little pun in there, I guess. And now down at the bottom, you'll see the LREC trees is still highlighted in my case. I can deselect those two different ways easily. One, and this is usually the way I do it just because, but it's not always intuitive. There's a little option where you can click at the top left-hand corner, or I can go back up to map tab at the top, the map tab, and select clear. So I can click this, or I can click the corner and it'll clear it out. So you can clear it here or clear the white little box at the top. Good. Now we have our trees in there. All right, this is good. I suggest we take about a 5-minute break and then we'll push through to the end. So we'll have it'll let's come back at 3:23. Thank you all, by the way, for sticking around on this Friday afternoon. I know we all are pretty busy, and this doesn't always come super easy to everybody. In fact, doesn't come easy to almost anybody, in my experience. But especially right at the beginning, but then the learning curve goes up pretty steep once you start getting the hang of some of this stuff. It's for a crash course in the nuts and bolts of doing a GIS project. This hopefully is hitting the spot. And yeah, and still I like the questions too. It really shows that everybody's they're plugging along and figuring it out. Yeah, we're all here to help on that stuff. So, all right, we'll get going. We'll push through the last little bit, about another half hour, and then we can go on to our weekend. All right. So we have a bunch of things in here. We have a map we have very little visualized now in the way that things are laid out. Let's start composing a map and create something to look at that's nice. What I'm going to do is we just showed you the one step for create doing the for clipping off the selected area of the trees that now is in our folders instead of being sourced from online. Let's do a similar type of selection of the polygons because we want to have something that's useful. Actually, we don't even have to. It's already being done for us, so we'll skip that. We can do the same thing with the LREC projects to LREC fields, but I just remembered that before last time I did this workshop, I pre-did this for the workshop, so it would save time since we already got the idea of selection. So what I did is I just put the field down on there, and if I zoom in, you'll see the field area there. Let's do a little style or symbology changes here. And how we do that when we have the F41, what I did is, by the way, from the polygons, I just grabbed and I dragged the field out from inside of it and put it right below the trees. And the next step is I'm going to just click on the purple, in my case, the pinkish kind of almost purple, but light purple or pink color. Click on this, and what you'll see is on the right-hand side, you'll get a bunch of options that pop up. And these pop-ups, usually it'll look something like what you're seeing here. If it doesn't, then you'll have to click on the symbol over here, and then you'll get the same view. And what I'm going to do is I'm just click on black outline. So it gives me the outline of that layer. And so there we have essentially like a cookie cutter that we can end up clipping some of the raster layers. We don't need this NDVI layer. I was going to show you how to visualize that, but I'm going to come back to that later on if we have time. But we do have this false color infrared under there. And we don't need all of that for context in this case. What we do want is we just want to isolate that particular field and not have all the rest of the raster. So now I want to do what's called clip raster, so geoprocessing tool. And on this, what we do is we go up to analysis on the top tabs, click analysis.
I'm
Yes?
sorry. I think I may have missed where you turned it from where everything went red back to this infrared where it was like everything was kind of black before.
Oh, okay. Well, is I turned off one of the layers above.
Oh,
So what I did is I just went down the line and turned off stuff until I got down to where it's the mosaic layer that's showing. And by clicking off the check marks. And and I get it. When you're looking on like trying to look at the Zoom screen and I just say it quick, your eyes can't be everywhere at once on the screen, especially little in the corner. So yeah, I just unchecked on my contents until I was down there to the bottom. And now what I'm going to do is I am going to clip that raster. And how I do that is I'm going to go up to the analysis tab at the top, click on tools. And I've already favorited it, I'm sure, because I do clip raster a lot. It's because it's in my favorites by default. But what I would suggest to you is just type in clip raster. And you'll see it pop up as the first option. And what I'll do is just click on that. Now my input raster is going to be the layer we see in the background is the mosaic. Do the drop down and go all the way down to the bottom. Either one of those ones on the bottom will work. And then for output extent, I'm just going to do the F41 N field. Now, if we go down below, we're going to do a couple things. We're going to click on the toggle on the radio box for use input features for clipping geometry and click the maintain clipping extent. Click both of those. And now we'll see there's the output raster data set is going to be F41 North drone MS mosaic clip. That honestly, that's a fine enough name for me. So I'm going to just leave it as it is. We can change that around. We can change the location. It's going to write it to the geo database
Hey,
as it
Sean,
is. Yes.
if I can make one point, if anyone's wondering why Sean clicked those things on or off, you can always hover and click over the blue eye buttons, and
Oh,
it'll give
yeah.
you information about what each one of those things do.
Yep. That's a really good point, Shane. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah. So if you read those things, you can the second one you don't always have to have checked, but that's yeah, that happens a lot of places throughout all of ArcGIS. So I can look at the anywhere where I hover over something, you see an exclamation mark or an eye, then you get yeah, you get the information you'll need. Good. But once this is done, we don't have to do anything else. All we have to do is click run. It'll take not super long. But what you will see is it pops up and it looks like that original, um, the kind of true color look, but not quite. And that's because it went back to this original band order of 1, 2, 3. But remember, band one was actually blue, two was green, three was red. So it was a little mixed up. So what we'll want to do is if we want to just keep it in the color infrared, we'll right click, go to band 5, right click on the next one, go to band 3, and then right click on the last one and go to band 2. And then it'll look more or less the same as what was there before. But remember the stretch that we adjusted earlier hasn't been readjusted. We don't have to worry about that now. We've already done it, but it just has the color balance is just a little different, put it that way. But it's fine. Now let's remove those other, or not even remove. We can actually start removing stuff if we'd like. But let's uncheck those two at the bottom because we don't need that background. We're going to start getting into actually creating our products. One note though, and I did touch on this earlier, but I want to revisit it because it's very, very useful just to know it's there. And I don't want to take for granted that everybody knows this is an option, is that there is plenty of base imagery that's available. Not just here, you can come to office hours if you want to find other imagery, but there is, if I go to map at the top tab and click on the drop down from the base map, remember earlier I showed the hybrid imagery option. I can click on that again, and it's going to give me background imagery that's for that area that eventually, in theory, should pop up. World imagery. There he goes. I just had to scroll a little bit. Well, you can see the difference is though, even though that world imagery is really good, it's just not nearly as high a resolution is the drone imagery. But what I'll do now is I'll just uncheck that, and I'm going to go up to the top and uncheck the hybrid imagery option too, because I don't need those in there. We're working toward our final product now. So now we actually have something that looks like that final map product that we saw earlier. But we're going to continue further. We are going to now join the packline data with those trees. And I don't know why that broke earlier in the one that I tried to show. It was working on, let's see, when I worked on it last, I must have accidentally did something wrong to it when I was playing with the project earlier, but it worked this morning. But But what I'm getting at is now, see these little, you can barely see them on my view screen, or maybe you can on yours. There's the little orange dots in my case that are overlaying the trees, the um the rasters version of the trees. And so what we're going to do is we can change the stylos just for temporary by clicking on the dot, the F41N trees. Click on that, and you can see options across the right side. Some of those, they're mostly red, which is going to be red on red, and it's not like necessarily the best style, but we can click on one of those and then go up to properties. So you see at the top of the symbology pane, there's properties, and we can click on that. And then from there, we can change the color. So there's the red, the second little option down, changes to something like yellow, and click apply. Now you can actually see them, but they're all the same size. That just designates the positions. Just a really quick one. This is, by the way, in the directions. You don't have to do this because it's going to be it's not going to let's see. It's going to take too much time to really go through the explanation of this, given the time that we have left. But where this is a point where you might want to edit the positions of your trees, because just as a note, you can see the little gap across the tree top where there's two trees that are there where there's actually no trees. And that's because there was a gap between the pack line data and when the imagery was taken. And so those trees were removed that year so that really those trees don't really pertain. Obviously, they don't have any data. And so how I could do that, though, is I could, and you don't have to do this, with this highlighted, I could go up to edit, and then I could do select, collect, and then select one of those trees, or control, or just click. I can just click either one of these. And if I wanted to, I could right click it, and I could delete it if I wanted to, or I could move it if I wanted to and start moving that tree around to wherever I wanted it to go to. See how it's not in the right place? There's no tree underneath that. But I'm going to discard those changes instead of saving them, but that's how you could edit your layers. Yes, I'm going to discard it. So that's just a little aside. That's how you edit your layers. Delete, adjust, and so forth. I digress. Let's do a little bit of the final map product stuff. And that is, we're going to join this with those attributes of the pack line. And how we do that is we right click on this layer, and you'll see the option for join and relates about halfway down. We'll click on add join. I just thought of something that might make this a little bit more intuitive instead of jumping on. Hold it right there. I'm going to come right back to that. If I open up the attribute table on this, because we did this earlier, but you'll see all of this data here, and it ends with the name Lynn Cove in the field, but it doesn't have anything about the trees. And I showed you this one down here, data. Now open. And you'll see it has diameter, but it's just not spatial. Now, why I open that, I'm going to go back to this, right click, and then join and relates, add join. So when I said this, that's the F41 North trees. I'm going to click the input field of this, being the FID LOL rec option, and automatically it recognizes that there's another layer in here, specifically the pack line data that has that same field. And so it automatically fills it in for you, or it should at least. If you picked on the first FID number, it won't, I don't believe. But the second one, the FID LOL one, it will recognize that's the joining field. And you're going to keep all joined records. And the join operation is, we can just leave it blank and click OK. Now, what happened now is now if I go to this F41 trees, right click and open attribute table, you'll see that before it ended with name, but now each of these trees has the weight, the diameter, the volume, and the roundness of all of the navel oranges that are on those particular trees. Now we can do a little bit better of a little more, I don't know, nifty, you might say, of symbology. And how that works is I'm going to go to the F41 trees that's still highlighted. I'm going to go up to feature layer at the top. And then I'm going to go down to the drop down below symbology. And you'll see a bunch of different options here. One of those options is graduated symbols, like halfway down. Not proportionate symbols, but graduated symbols. Clicking on graduated symbols, you'll see that the top trees popped up as being way bigger than the bottom. And the reason for that is that they're being represented by the field of the unique ID, the FID number. It's not being represented by anything really useful. That's just the arbitrary number of the trees. So what I'll do on the right-hand side under symbology, the field that I want it represented from, graduated from, is going to be the weight. Could be others there too. And what the heck? Why did it disappear? Oh, this is what is going on here? Hey, Shane, have you ever seen anything like this? You're on here.
Yeah, I'm on here. I have never seen something like that.
This is interesting. Explains why it didn't show up earlier.
Sean, look at the lower. There's an exclamation point. Can you see what that is down
Oh,
at
yeah,
at the
that's right.
bottom?
Okay. And when I click on that, deprecation.
It
ArcGIS
looks
data
like,
feed.
yeah, the very bottom one, there's a drawing alert. An expected field was not found or could not be retrieved properly.
All right, I think I might have. Let's see. This I just updated my ArcGIS Pro, so that's explaining it here. Okay, that's what happens when you update your stuff right before a workshop. Okay, so I got another idea on how this can be done, maybe. And this might, but we're going to all go on this journey together, I guess. And so it's not allowing us to visualize that as it is right now because it's the tables are joined. That join is a temporary join. We're going to want to make it permanent. And the way you do that is we're going to go up to the F41 trees. I'm going to just go to symbology just because I want it to be a single symbol. And it should pop back up on there. In this case, it's purple for me again. I'm going to right click on that and go down to data, export features. And, I'm going to double check something. I don't think any of my trees are selected. No, they shouldn't be. So F41 trees, I'm going to have this exported to my geodatabase. Or if you have to do it to a shape file, you can. So I'm going to say GDB and click OK. Now, let's find out if it works this time. Now, here's the thing. Now, if I open up the attribute table now, it still should have all that information in there. But because it's in the native environment that ArcGIS likes now, and it's permanently attached, so it's not like the join is not temporary, It's actually all a part of the file. I bet you now that it works. So how I'm going to do that now is I'm going to have the first one, the geodatabase one, go to do the drop down and go to graduated symbols. And my hunch is when I click on wait, it works now. Yep. That's eventually, like I said, eventually you'll just run into things like this and go, I can figure it out. Or I'll ask Shane and he'll know. Or I'll Google it and they'll know. Someone will know. So now what we're seeing here is that these symbols are graduated based upon the how heavy the fruit is off the tree. You could play with these things if you wanted, but one thing I don't like is that I don't even know what that salmon color, I guess, whatever that color is. I'm going to click on the color option, the template, and I'm going to change it back to my yellow color that I like and apply. And then you can see a little bit better of a graduated amount of the weight of those that come off there.
I'm sorry, can you show how you got the GDB again?
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so what I did is there's the trees that we had before. I right clicked on it and I did data, export features, and then I just changed the name of it because it's going into my geodatabase. In my case, I just tagged the end of the name of it with GDB, and then I exported it. I did okay, and I sent it out, and then it created it in here. If you don't have the geodatabase option, like was the problem earlier, you could also go in and put it in the folder and then give it a like LREC trees name again, gdb.shp for shape. So .shp at the end. Right on.
Thank you.
There you go. Good. So now we have some trees. Let's make this into a map to kind of see what it looks like in the we have like 15 minutes to get that. I was hoping to get done in like 10 minutes from now. We'll see if we can do this in 10 minutes. It's not super technical, but it's complex. It takes time sometimes. And what I mean by that is we need to create a layout view because we're in a map view right now. We're going to create a layout. And so we can put in titles and all those different things like to get to the same example we did earlier. And how we do that, we go up to insert and we're going to do a new layout. And so there's the insert tab at the top, left-hand corner, third one over. And then right underneath it, there'll be new layout. By the way, if your screen's like reduced, sometimes, I don't know how far you have to reduce it, but sometimes it's like, it looks different. But click the drop down and then we're going to select ANSI landscape letter. So 8.5 by 11, the second one down. So not portrait, but landscape. And you'll get a blank, like piece of paper looking thing here. And right next to your map. So you'll still have the map at the top of your window. By the way, this is a time when this happens sometimes. Just be careful when you're toggling over these, you don't accidentally hit the X because I don't want to have to stop and like explain how to get back to that. That's it's a hassle. But yeah, so just don't accidentally X out of one of these right now. But we have layout and we have a map. The layout is first thing we want to do is we want to put in our map. And the way we do that is with the layout, we're going to go up to view, layout. What the heck? Okay. This looks a little different than what I'm used to seeing. One second. Oh, it's just moved over from because I have my screen a different size. I'm going to click, so insert map frame. It's in the center. I'm going to do the click drop down. So if you see it, so I'm on the insert tab and then map frame is almost dead center. I'm going to go down and click on the map. So if you follow me, insert, map frame, map. But you won't see anything happen because we have to draw it on there. And how we do this, we go up to the top corner. It kind of naturally snaps to the corner. Click and drag all the way across the screen to the bottom corner and let go. And you'll see your map pop in there. This may or may not be the size that you want once it pops in. So hopefully everybody got there. And very likely it is not the size that you want. And this is going to come up in a minute too when we do our pop-up. But what I want to do to make sure that it's in the right place, because look what happens if I click and drag, it moves it off of there. And we don't want that. I have to do the back button to move it back. That's because the layout is just not, it's separate. It's like, you think of it as just a layer of paper that puts down, pulling it from the map. So it's like a layer of a map element, and the map is the key element, but it's not the only element. And so what we'll want to do is to be able to adjust this position on the map. What we can do is we right click and go up to the top and click activate. And how that does is it lets us move it around. So we'll want to get it basically in the center. It's almost right by default on my screen. So it's fine roughly there, but slightly under center in the right here for now. You could, by the way, go down and do fine level adjustments with so it's 1 and 120 or 1 to 525. I might do 1 to 500 and click and just adjust it a teeny bit, but it depends on what kind of level of OCD you got to get to exactly right, which healthy OCD is not a problem when it comes to making really good maps sometimes. But anyhow, so we got this here. Now we want to get out of activation. And this is always something that I wish they made it more easy, because I get locked into activation and I scratch my head. I'd go up to layout, and then at the top right of the top tabs, layout, and then close activation, because now the map's where I want it on my screen. Now it won't scroll around and they can do other things, because it'll stop you from doing any of the next steps if you don't close that activation. So up the top, layout, and then close activation. Now let's add in the other map elements. The first one would probably be your title, I'm guessing. And the way we do that is we go over to the graphics. There's the option at the top right, almost right top corner, where there's a graphics and text. You can do a drop down, and you can select from these different options. In this case, you can have something that's in a boundary box, text, rectangular text. In this case, just straight text is probably good. And then I'm going to just drag across the top. And what you'll notice is that on the left-hand side, the contents now have changed. These are the map elements that are in there. So one of the main one is the map frame. That's that's coming from the map. The next one is the text. If I slowly click on that, I can change that to title and enter. It still says text, but I just know that element is my title. Now, if I double click on it on the screen, what you'll get is the map element information, and including what we want written in it. And right now it's text, but I'm going to change that to Lind Cove Research and Extension Center. Oops. And then I'm going to go up to the text symbol, because actually I can do the general. We can look at that. No, that's good. Text symbol, and 36 is just too big. I'm going to make it something more like 26. And click apply. I can close this X out of the symbology and the next one and the geoprocessing and the catalog. Just give myself some more room. I can always bring those back up. And I'm going to grab that and I'm going to put it up kind of sorted toward the top left. You can adjust it if you wanted to. You can make it bold as well. and click apply. If you want it to stand out more, you can change the size. Maybe I'd want it to be 28, but not bold. Most of the time, cartographers kind of lean toward away from bold anymore, I noticed. But we have that. That's good enough for now. Now we might do a repeat of that. We can say copy and paste, and then drag the next one down below it. But this time, we can change the title. So on the right, so what I did is copy, paste, and then I'm just going to change the title to navel oranges. Or you can say, I don't remember what the original map that we showed you earlier, but we could say field, oops, 41 north, navel oranges. And see, then it comes in. We can change the options, the text symbol to maybe be a little smaller because it's hierarchically not quite as important, and click apply. Good. So we have a title there. Now, next one is something called a neat line. We can add that in simply by going up and adding from insert, and there's shape options that are available. And one of these, let's see, where's it at? Not a rectangle. It is a rectangle, right top center. And I can just drag a long, narrow rectangle all the way across. And that rectangle, then I can change the color of by double clicking on it. So there's, oh, that's in the map frame. What am I thinking? That's not, I might have just misled you there because it didn't add that in there. It just added another map frame. I'm going to delete that. The actual thing I'm looking for is, where the heck, graphics and text. I have to do every once in a while, the updated versions change a little bit of what it looks like on here. And I get the right one. Oh, just it's under the text. So down to the polygons. So I'm going to do a polygon. So if you follow that, so now I'm going to put a neat line in with under the text, do the drop down, select polygon, and then I'm going to drag that all the way across. If you saw what I did there, I went under the text, it just drops all the way down. And select polygon, drag it across. I can double click on that. And I can change the symbol style to be something else like blue, dark blue. Click apply. I can do the color, the fill also be dark blue or something to that, something close to it. So the whole line is then a straight line across. And if I want to, I can zoom in and make it narrower. So it just doesn't overwhelm the map. You could also change it to something even slightly darker so it's like stands out. And play with the cartographic effect just a little bit here and there. Good. Two more things that we'll do on here. Actually, let me think about that. There's three more things. We can do a north arrow, super easy. A legend, pretty easy. And a call out, which I'll just explain how to do it, but I won't have you do it, but it's pretty simple also. Just take a few couple minutes. So the first one is the legend. And what I do here is insert over at the top. There's going to be the legend option. Click the drop down. I'm going to just click legend number 1, and I'm going to drag that on the bottom corner of the screen. And what you'll see is all kinds of stuff showing up in the legend, and I don't need all that stuff in there. Really, what I want is just the trees. So I'll uncheck everything down the legend except for the F41 North trees and GDB. Also, I don't really like the fact that it has legend at the top. So I'm going to go over to the right and I'm going to figure out which one of these, a label. What in the world? Trying to look for where the get rid of legend. That's been an I know how I usually do. I convert it to graphics at a later time when the final product's there, but it having it labeled as legend is just annoying. So getting rid of there he goes. Legend title, uncheck that. So what I did is I just clicked on it over in the far right-hand side, and then I ended up unchecking the legend where it says legend and then show title, and I unchecked that. Then if I adjust some of this, if I move the size of it, it should move it around. The way that you can get rid of all those extra decimal places is we won't worry about that right now, but two ways to do it. One is the not recommended way usually, and that's right click and convert to graphics and then convert to graphics again, and then you can delete those off. Or you can go into the original layer and adjust the symbol, but that's going to take longer than we have here. And wherein we'd really just want to put in a north arrow by going up to insert, north arrow, probably do one of the top defaults, put it somewhere logical and not too overwhelming. And then finally, sometimes you'd put in some more service credits or a description of your map right here using the same option as before, service description or service layers or description. And I'll just change that over in here to something smaller, much smaller. Apply. So you can put your information there. And then you have all of the elements of a map minus the call out. I said I would just show you how to do the call out instead of having you go through that step. All it is it's creating a new map. And as for those of you who want to hang out just for a second, I'll do this. I'm going to insert it. Let's see. I'm going to go over insert, new map, go to my original map, go grab the 41 field and the LREC boundary. I did control, copy, layout, map 2. I just paste in those in here. Get rid of the background world imagery. I'm going to adjust this just to be something more appropriate, like gray. Apply. Turn off the world imagery. And finally, what I would do on this one is then I'd go back to my layout and I would insert the map frame and just drag it across the top corner. I have to still activate to make the right size. So it actually fits there right correctly. And then I'll go back to layout and close activation. Adjust this. And then finally, while this map frame is active on here, I have to go over to the third one over and just reduce the borderline. And then I have for something pretty close to what I showed you when we first started. Good. With that, I think we just went over by 2-3 minutes now. That's hopefully that wasn't too holding everybody up from getting to their weekend fun. But thank you all for coming today. If you have any questions, I'll hang out for a few after this. There's one thing we are going to send out, and if maybe Priyanka already has, she was going to send out an evaluation link. We love it if you fill those out. It's very important to us. The good, bad, the ugly, hopefully the more good than the bad and the ugly. But if you can fill that out, we'd really greatly appreciate it. And thank you all again for being here today. And I will take questions if anybody has any.